I think the deepest failure of Season 8 wasn't just the plot, but the systematic character assassination of the complex characters we'd followed for nearly a decade. The writers prioritized shock value over the logical and emotional consistency of their journeys. Let's start with the Mad Queen arc. I'm convinced Daenerys' turn wasn't a natural conclusion, but a straight-up character assassination by the writers. Think about it. Her past acts of cruelty were always framed as righteous justice against tyrants, not as a foreshadowing of mass slaughter. In Essos, she was a liberator. The show tried to retroactively paint her as unstable, completely ignoring the context of her actions. Notice how quickly it all happened. Her fall was crammed into just a few episodes. The script just lists a series of external traumas. Losing Jorah, Rhaegal, and Missandei, the news of Jon's parentage, her isolation in the north. We're told why she supposedly snapped, but we're never shown the internal psychological journey. This makes her final act feel hollow and unconvincing. As Varys prophetically told Tyrion,
"I've served tyrants most of my life. They all talk about destiny."
Most importantly, her actions betray her own philosophy. Remember what she told Tyrion?
Lannister, Targaryen, Baratheon, Stark, Tyrell. They're all just spokes on a wheel. I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
Burning the common people of King's Landing isn't breaking the wheel. It's the ultimate act of the wheel, crushing those at the bottom. She became the very tyrant she swore to destroy. In her final conversation with Jon, she's still talking about this idealistic future.
Build the new world with me. We do it together. We break the wheel together.
But her actions show she just wanted to be the only spoke left at the top. I believe her actions weren't madness, but a conscious, Machiavellian choice born of desperation. Unable to win the love of Westeros, she chose fear. When Jon pulls away from her, she says,
All right then. Let it be fear.
That's a much stronger motivation, but the writing was too clumsy to handle that nuance, opting instead for the simpler, less satisfying Targaryen madness trope. Look at the double standard the show applies to its male and female characters. Tywin or Stannis commit horrific acts for political gain, and they're seen as ruthless strategists. When Daenerys does the same, it's chalked up to inherited madness. The writers needed a final monster, and they decided to turn their most powerful heroine into one, stripping her of political logic and replacing it with a simplistic, gendered trope about an emotional breakdown. Now let's talk about the complete nullification of Jaime's multi-season redemption arc. I believe his return to Cersei wasn't a tragic finale, but a betrayal by the writers that made his entire journey meaningless. Jaime's arc was about a man who committed a dishonorable act, killing the Mad King for a noble cause, saving the innocent, and who slowly rediscovered his goodness, largely through his relationship with Brienne. His ending erases all of that development for the sake of a poetic but completely unearned fatalism. The analysis can be boiled down to a single destructive line. When Tyrion reminds him of the innocent lives in King's Landing, Jaime replies,
"To be honest, I never really cared much for them. Innocent or otherwise."
This statement isn't just a moment of human weakness. It's a direct retcon of his entire backstory. It cheapens his defining act as the Kingslayer and turns his confession to Brienne about saving the city into a lie. Remember the heartbreaking scene where Brienne begs him,
"You're a good man and you can't save her."
But he rejects all his growth, replying,
"She's hateful. And so am I."
Look at his actions. He leaves Cersei at the end of Season 7 to fight for the living, an act of pure honor. He knights Brienne, passing his newfound sense of duty onto her. He begins a relationship with her, seemingly completing his break from Cersei. And then, in the space of one episode, he throws it all away. That's not a tragic relapse, it's narrative whiplash. The argument that Cersei was an addiction he couldn't beat doesn't hold up for me. It's interesting in theory, but the show doesn't depict that internal struggle. Instead, his decision is presented as a sudden, cold choice that makes him seem cruel, and his entire redemption arc feel like a temporary phase, not a fundamental change. It seems to me the writers were fixated on a single image, Jaime and Cersei dying together in the Red Keep's crypts. That image, they came into this world together, they'll die together, became an end in itself. And for that image, they sacrificed the logical and emotional consistency of 7 seasons of Jaime's development. It reveals a critical flaw in their writing process. They prioritized the destination over the journey. Next, the sharp and inexplicable transformation of the show's shrewdest strategist into a naive fool. I'd argue that his character was dumbed down to serve the needs of the plot. Tyrion's defining trait was his intellect and his cynical understanding of power dynamics. Remember his famous line,
I drink and I know things.
That line became a meme, but remember its context. When asked how he knew dragons don't do well in captivity, he replied,
How do you know this?
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
It was a demonstration of his practical knowledge-based intelligence. But starting in Season 5, and especially in Season 8, he makes a series of astoundingly poor strategic decisions that betray his very essence. Just look at the laundry list of his failures. He trusted the slavers in Meereen, came up with the plan to capture a white, underestimated Cersei again and again, despite knowing her better than anyone, and believed she would surrender to save her child. Each of his plans isn't just a mistake, but a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature from a character who was once its most insightful observer. I think the reason for this decline is that the show refused to follow Tyrion's darker book path. To keep him a likable hero, the writers sanded off his cynical, vengeful edges. But in doing so, they also took away the intelligence that was intrinsically linked to that cynicism. Good Tyrion became stupid Tyrion, a man who suddenly believed in the better nature of his monstrous sister. The character's popularity and Peter Dinklage's performance created a narrative trap. Making a fan favorite a villain is a commercial risk, so the writers decided to sanitize him. This decision had a cascading effect. To justify his goodness, he had to become naive. To be naive, he had to become stupid. Let's break down the narrative dead end of Jon Snow's true parentage. I think the central mystery of the series was reduced to a mere plot device, turning the main hero into a passive bystander. The reveal that Jon Snow is actually Aegon Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne and the literal embodiment of a Song of Ice and Fire, should have been the story's climax. Instead, it had almost no meaningful impact on the plot, other than serving as a catalyst for Daenerys' paranoia. Throughout the final season, Jon was systematically stripped of his agency. He played no significant role in the final plan against the Night King, the very enemy he had spent years warning everyone about. During the Battle of Winterfell, he just flew around on a dragon in the dark, and then yelled at an undead Viserion, a moment of complete impotence. His character was boiled down to a few repetitive, simplistic lines.
She is our queen.
I don't want it.
Even when Sam tells him the truth, his first reaction is to defend Ned Stark's honor, not to grapple with his own destiny.
My father was the most honorable man I ever met. You said he lied to me all my life.
And when he finally tells Daenerys, the scene cuts away before we see any real consequences. He just says,
My name. My real name. Is Aegon Targaryen.
and all she cares about is his claim to the throne. This isn't the dialogue of a protagonist wrestling with a world-changing revelation. These are the lines of a side character pushed to the narrative's margins. The writers, it seems, didn't understand what a climax is. They thought the mere act of revealing the R+L=J secret would be enough. But in storytelling, it's not the reveal that's the climax. It's the fallout. The lack of any meaningful fallout is what made it so disappointing. Jon's parentage didn't rally the lords, give him a unique advantage against the Night King, or influence his final decisions. It was just a fact, not a story. And now for the structural failure. The show's main existential threat was eliminated in a single anticlimactic episode, which basically turned the central conflict into a footnote. The White Walkers were teased from the very first scene of the entire series. They were built up as an apocalyptic, unstoppable force, defeating them in one battle at Winterfell before they ever became a real threat to the rest of Westeros was a staggering anticlimax. The battle itself was full of nonsensical tactics, from the Dothraki's blind charge into darkness to their certain death, to placing defensive trenches behind the main army. These decisions made the heroes look incompetent and undermined the battle's stakes. The Night King, after 8 seasons of silent menace, was killed without saying a word, without any hint of his motivation. The mysterious symbols, his connection to Bran, his ultimate goal, all of it was just dropped. I believe having Arya deliver the final blow was a narrative mistake. Her arc was about personal revenge against people, not saving the world from a magical apocalypse. That moment rightfully belonged to Jon Snow, whose entire story was tied to the threat from beyond the wall. By giving it to Arya, the writers chose a gotcha moment over thematic resonance. The show was called A Song of Ice and Fire. That implies a central conflict between the existential threat of the White Walkers, ice, and the forces of men and dragons, fire. By resolving the ice storyline in the 3rd episode of a 6-episode season, the writers made a definitive statement. The Game of Thrones was always more important than the Song of Ice and Fire. The decision by the great lords of Westeros, cynical, power-hungry figures, to unanimously elect an emotionless, disabled teenager with strange magical abilities as their king based on a single sentimental speech from a condemned traitor defies all the logic and political reality the show itself established. The entire justification hinges on Tyrion's question.
And who has a better story than Bran the Broken?
This line is deeply flawed. First, within the context of the show, nearly every other character has a more active and compelling story. Second, a good story was never a qualification for rule in Westeros. On the contrary, the show demonstrated that good stories often get you killed. Just ask Ned or Robb Stark. Bran's arc is the most disconnected from the show's political and human drama. He was absent for an entire season. Remember his reunion with Jaime in Winterfell. He shows no anger, no forgiveness, just repeats Jaime's words from the 1st episode.
The things we do for love.
Using his knowledge as a weapon to keep others off balance. Upon his return, he repeatedly stated that he was no longer Bran Stark, and that he couldn't be the Lord of anything because he was the three-eyed raven. His sudden acceptance of the crown is a complete reversal with no explanation. And in the finale, when Tyrion offers him the crown, he responds with a chilling line.
Why do you think I came all this way?
This confirms he wasn't a passive observer, but a cold-blooded player who manipulated events all along, allowing the destruction of King's Landing to clear his own path to power. The best story argument can be interpreted as a meta-commentary from the writers about the power of storytelling itself. In essence, they're telling us that the ultimate winner in history is the one who controls the story, which is Bran, as the world's memory. However, this meta-commentary fails because it's delivered within a narrative that has just spectacularly collapsed. The writers are trying to make a profound statement about storytelling in a season condemned for its terrible storytelling. The irony is staggering. The line, "Who has a better story?" misses the mark because the immediate response from the audience is, "The story you told for 8 years and just destroyed." It's the final, unintentional admission of the writer's own failure.